Hey, how'd you like that? Not too bad, huh? Well, why are we in the music room, you're probably guessing? Because it's time for our next lecture, and we're going to kind of pick up where we left off. In the previous lecture, we were talking about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and the influence of music, and once they heard the music, they were supposed to bow down to that statue that Nebuchadnezzar had built, right? Well, here we are now in Daniel chapter 3, lecture number 3. And the two main points that we're going to be discussing on this one are the courage of your convictions and consequences as a result of decisions and actions. Right? So we've got some musical accompaniment this time. So in this lecture, we're going to cover verses 16 through 23. Two of my favorite movies are Braveheart and Gladiator. There's a line in Braveheart where he says, William Wallace says, "Every man dies, but not every man truly lives." And then there's a line in Gladiator where Russell Crowe's character says, "What we do in life echoes in eternity." Nice. So, every man dies, but not every man truly lives. What we do in life echoes in eternity, right? These three men knew that what they were doing was going to have an eternal impact, right? They knew the God of the Hebrews, they knew God, and as a result, they realized that, hey, if we don't bow down and Nebuchadnezzar chooses to put us in the fiery furnace, then worst case scenario, we'll die and we'll go to heaven. Best case scenario, we'll have a significant influence on those people around us, right? So your actions and your choices and the decisions that you make significantly influence those around you. What do we got now, Mr. Murray? Now remember, every time specific instruments were played, everybody was supposed to be bowing down to the statue that Nebuchadnezzar had put up, right? Well, these three, based on their convictions, they chose not to bow down. You remember Daniel chapter 1, where they chose not to defile themselves on the king's menu? Well, here we are again in chapter 3, where they have chosen to take a stand for what they believe. This is your convictions, right? One of the interesting things that we see in this section of scripture is the fact that these young men, actually they're not that young anymore, right? Because we're 20 years past chapter 2. But these guys would have had their convictions established way before this moment, right? So their relationship with God was so strong and their dedication to God was so strong that when the trial came, not if, but when the trial came, they knew how they were going to decide to act, right? So the challenge for you guys then is obviously to think through what are your convictions right now in your youth, because you've obviously got a long life ahead of you, hopefully, and you're going to be faced with trials, you're going to be faced with challenges, and how are you going to respond in that moment, right? You need to establish your convictions early and be willing to stand on them as you get older, right? Another thing that we see here, again, kind of a reflection of the character of Nebuchadnezzar again. We've already talked about the fact that he's got anger issues, now he's got rage issues, emotionally unstable, and that type of thing. There's an interesting kind of thought here as it reflects on Nebuchadnezzar's character. He chose to turn the fiery furnace up 7 times hotter. If he really wanted to make an example of these guys, what he should have done was actually make the fire colder and make the whole process longer. But by doing what he did and increasing the heat 7 times hotter, he actually sped up the process, right? And so the point there is this: sometimes our emotions get the better of us, and it makes us, or our emotions can lead us to make irrational decisions, right? And we've seen that all the time with Nebuchadnezzar and his actions. He makes decisions based on emotions, and that's not always a healthy thing to be doing. Calm down. Don't forget, it's the music that's significantly influential in this section. All right, let me close with a couple of thoughts from people who you're probably familiar with as it relates to taking a stand outside of the Bible, right? Martin Luther The man who initiated the Reformation by nailing his 95 Theses on the door of the church in Wittenberg, when told to recant at the Diet of Worms in 1521, closed his testimony by saying this: "I cannot and will not recant anything, since it is neither safe nor right to go against conscience. Here I stand, I can do no other. May God help me." On December 1st, 1955, a 42-year-old African-American woman named Rosa Parks chose not to obey James Blake's demand that she relinquish her seat to a white man. Her subsequent arrest and trial for this act of civil disobedience triggered the Montgomery bus boycott, one of the largest and most successful mass movements against racial segregation in history, and it launched Martin Luther King Jr., one of the organizers of the boycott, to the forefront of the civil rights movement. Her role in American history earned her an iconic status in American culture, and her actions have left an enduring legacy for civil rights movements around the world. These are just two of many examples of people who have chosen to stand on their convictions, right? In your world, it may look a little bit different, but the importance of having your convictions established early in your life is a pretty important thing to do. I'd like to thank Mr. Murray for his contribution to today's lecture, and hope you guys are continuing to learn some things as we keep plodding our way through Daniel chapter 3. All right, until next time.